Hello, my name is Andrew. You can call me Cookies, and today we'll be taking a look at Mythic Hungering Destroyer through a Discipline Priest perspective and talking about and reviewing a VOD and a log and discussing this fight in general. So, my job as a Disc Priest is to cover each of the second expunges. So we'll cut the phase into each consume, I guess. So what happens in this fight? The pattern that always follows is there is a desolate and then an expunge and then a desolate, and then an expunge, and then a consume, and then it repeats that process over. So there's always desolate, expunge, consume, and then it goes back and forth. And our job is to heal through each of those, the second expunge that happens. So we have desolate, expunge, desolate, and then expunge. That expunge at the end before the consume happens, that is our job as a Disc Priest. That's what we were assigned to heal through. So because of this, I checked the timers before going into this fight, and the second expunge happened. You can actually see most of the timers here for a lot of the abilities. So our first Spirit Shell is going to be here at about a little after a minute on the second expunge. So what I end up doing is just using my Spirit Shell pre-pull and just getting... I was supposed to be getting... Unfortunately, there was a little bit of a miscommunication, and I was supposed to be getting an Innervate before we pulled the boss, so that's why I'm starting the boss with like 70% mana. It's kind of unintentional, so there's not much we can do about that, but you know, we do what we can with what we got. And what I decide to do is ramp before the pull actually starts and just throw out a Spirit Shell as the pull begins, and then I get some free healing off of the first volatile eruption and all that happens, or volatile ejection. And then we will have that Spirit Shell back up when we need it at 1 minute. Other than this, we can expend one charge of Radiance before, so like right now I can expend one charge of Radiance before I need all my stuff back up for the ramp that happens. So I should be doing a small ramp here. You can see me applying some shields, and then we run back into the group, we throw out a Radiance, and then we should be using, what we should have done is Schism Independence, but it's too late now to press Schism, so we're just going to save it for our cooldowns. But we're using that, that mini ramp before our major ramp because we don't want to just keep the Radiance charges off cooldown. So this is where our major ramp is happening. This is where we do a double Radiance into our cooldowns, into our typical rotation, and then this is the expunge that we're covering. And we are just standing still during this expunge and just soaking our own orb. If we ever have the Gluttonous Miasma debuff, I'll ask somebody else to soak the orb. Usually the tank will do it for me. But that's just so that my smite spam at the end of my atonement and the end of my ramp doesn't get completely ruined by having to run out of the group. So we just kind of let me sit next to the boss so I can keep the ramp going. And then here for consume, you generally want to try to use a Radiance charge or have some kind of healing going, or you just don't use anything at all and you just kind of let the other healers handle this part with the, the AMZ and barrier and Spirit Link and stuff like that. You can see I actually did my mini ramp right after my major ramp, so I think did we prep it for this consume? It looks like it. Yeah, so I apply some shields before the consume happens, and then I'm going to Radiance here, dot the boss, penance to run out, and then I should be trying to land a Schism. There's the Schism. A little bit awkward, so this is, this isn't super ideal. So you might want to try to just save the mini ramp for like this Desolate or Volatile Ejection, or as you come back into the group from the consume, that's a good time to probably mini ramp as well. Just to get that on cooldown. And then this is the expunge that we're prepping for again. I believe this is the one. I think, oh, okay, this is the other priest. So this actually isn't our cooldown. So we're holding our cooldown like much longer. Which I'll show you guys the pattern when we get into Warcraft logs. Because we kind of change up our pattern because we're holding Spirit Shell for longer than a minute. We're holding it for about 1 minute and 30 every single time. So that allows us to cast 2 Radiances in between our major ramps rather than just 1 on most of these. But yeah, this fight is super repetitive. It's really just, you're either ramping for the expunges like this, or you're ramping for the desolates, and that's pretty much your job as a disc priest. So you just get the timing down, and there's not really anything too fancy about it. Just the idea of standing still if you're ramping for expunge is probably pretty important so that you can get those extra smites in. And outside of this, just fight-specific things. As a disc priest, you can shield the people who have the Gluttonous Miasma debuff if they're having some trouble staying up, and especially during phases like this, you can see me shielding them, and when they're running out with expunge and whatnot. But other than that, you shouldn't try to apply atonements to them too frequently, because then you're applying that shield to them, but then you're also applying an atonement that isn't going to heal them at all over the next 14 seconds. So you just have to be, you know, cautious of applying atonements to those players. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take a quick look at the log for this fight. I like to use the damage taken metric for this. And we're going to go over to taken from ability. We're going to look at desolate. We're going to look at expunge. And we're going to look at consume. As this, and then we can go to our cast. And we'll look at Radiance and Spirit Shell. So you can see here, in between some of my major ramps, I am able to fit in 2 Radiances before I, use double again. And the kind of, I guess, rule of thumb you can use for this is if you're planning to hold Spirit Shell for longer than a minute and 30 seconds, let's say 1 minute and 30 seconds or more, then you're safe to use that other Radiance. Because Radiance's cooldown is 20 seconds, so technically if you're holding it for a minute and 20, that's fine too, but that's cutting it a little bit close. So I like to just play it safe. And if I know, I'm going to cast my first Radiance at 1 minute, and then I'm going to cast my second Radiance at about 2:30. So that gives me a minute and 30 seconds between those, which is more than enough to use 2 Radiance charges before, I need to start saving them for that upcoming ramp at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So just taking a look at this, obvious mistakes. Looks pretty clean here, looks clean up until about right here, and then this is where I miss 1 Radiance charge, because this is a minute gap right here between these 2 Spirit Shells, so I should have used a Radiance somewhere in here. Looks like this was during a Consume, so I should have just tried to get a Radiance out at the start of the Consume, just to do some extra free healing. And then it looks like this double Radiance here is also a little bit messed up, so we can actually zoom into this one and see what happened. We'll just reset the zoom one time. Go in here and look at this again. So we have a consume ending, and then we're just ramping for the upcoming expunge. This is the desolate that happens, so we're pressing that Spirit Shell. That's like generally the way that I measure when I should be pressing Spirit Shell, is if I'm ramping for expunge, I press Spirit Shell right as desolate hits the group. And that's usually like perfect timing for ramping up all those shields for the expunge. That way, because if you press it a little too early, a lot of those shields are going to get eaten by the desolate, and we don't necessarily want that to happen. Okay, so we'll go ahead and go to our timeline here and see what we were casting. So you can see this is us dealing with the consume, and then it looks like we start running in, we throw a couple power word shields, we waste a little bit of time. This should have just been more power word shields, and then we radiance, and then there's a big gap, and then another radiance, and then our cooldowns. So what should have happened here is, while I am running in, we can actually find where this is too in the VOD. So we go to 3 minutes. What is 300 seconds? Is that 5 minutes? Yeah, that's about 5 minutes right here. About to pull out a calculator to cool. We'll go to 5 minutes into the fight then and just see what was happening during this. So this is this consume that we were just talking about in the log. This is where we probably start applying shields here in a moment. There's shield 1. Okay, so we're just completely that's why. And I think I called for an interview here, but my mic, this is a new guild that I'm raiding with, so my mic was too quiet for some of the players. So I was kind of just standing here waiting around. So this is just a misuse of mana management, because we were kind of led to like assuming that we were going to use certain innervates at certain times, and sometimes it got a little bit messed up and we had miscommunication. So that completely explains it. That's all we needed to go check, is just how, you know, what happened with that radiance. So that's pretty much it for Hungering Destroyer. Hopefully that helps like you get an idea for the pattern that you're expecting to see in this fight. Remember, it's a Desolate, an Expunge, a Desolate, an Expunge, and then a Consume. And then it literally just repeats that process over and over until the fight's finished. And you can kind of plug your ramps in wherever you like. You can plug them in for Desolate, you can plug them in for Expunges. The way we had it is we had 2 Disc Priests, and we had 1 Disc Priest covering the first Expunge, and then 1 Disc Priest covering the second. And then when we got to this phase over here, I think the Disc Priest started covering Desolate, and I started covering the first Expunge of each phase. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So hopefully this video was helpful. Thank you guys for watching, and have a good one.